Hello everyone. I hope I'm live. So thank you very much, Rahul, for this invitation. Hello everyone. I think I'm live. Thank you very much, Rahul Suri, for this invitation to give this lecture this evening. The topic of my lecture will be India in 2030 and beyond. So we'll be talking about the youth, Indian youth, and the challenges and opportunities of Indian youth in 2020 and in 2030. So basically, I'll be reading out some material that I have been working on for the last 1 year, and we'll be talking about politics, agriculture, science and technology, innovation and education system, and some parts of growth, some sectors of the nation that requires our attention, such as healthcare. So to begin with, a report by the Hindu says that India is set to become the youngest country by the end of 2020, and the report further states that every third person in India today is a youth. In about 7 years from now, about in 2027, the median age in India will be 29 years, very likely a city dweller, making it the youngest country in the world. India is set to experience a dynamic transformation as the population burden of the past turns into a demographic dividend. But the benefit will be tempered with social and spatial inequality, the disparities in the nation. The population in the age group, you know, of 15 to 34 increased from 353 million in 2001 to 430 million in 2011, the recent data. And the current prediction suggests a steady increase in the population of the youngsters to 464 million by 2021, the next year, and finally a decline to 458 million by 2026. So we have about a decade when we will be the youngest nation in the world, and I often say that we are the youngest nation with the oldest civilization. Now, if you read a very interesting report by the Bloomberg US, they say that if you have ever been to India, it is likely that you have been startled by how young the country looks. The streets of any Indian town, even of the villages, are full of 20 somethings. Isn't this a surprise? India is a very young country. Half of its population is under the age of 25, and two-thirds are less than 35. So, as a recent Bloomberg News analysis discovered, India is likely to have the world's largest workforce by 2027, with a billion people aged between 15 and 64. Now, coming to the fact that we know that India is the youngest nation, how are we going to take it forward? That's the main question that we are going to discuss. The former judge of the Supreme Court of India, Markandeya Katju, a great columnist, he once wrote in one of his articles that reform will not do India any good, only a revolution will. I agree with his statement. We have the potential of being world leaders. We have a great amount of young population in our nation, and we could have achieved the level of the position of world leader years ago. But let us not play any blame game that we should the present and the past generations of politicians, lawmakers and policy makers are answerable to us, that they have to tell us why we couldn't be the leaders in the past 70 plus years. Let us not go into that blame game. Rather, let us ask ourselves that we have been given a second chance. India 2020 could not be a reality, but we can make India 2030 a reality. It is time for the young people to work in policy, lawmaking, and even openly participate in politics. and must be given space for equal representation and dissent. In 2019, N.R. Narayan Murthy, the founder of the Infosys, the co-founder of the Infosys, said that looking at what is happening in different parts of the country today, that youth need to state bluntly that this was not the country that our forefathers wanted or the forefather got freedom for. Our gross domestic product rate is unstable for many years now. The employment rate is many years lowest. The inflation is higher. Market is not, stable, and agriculture sector is suffering, which is making young people run away from agriculture to private sectors. Doctorate students, students with highest educational qualifications, are applying for a Group C and Group D jobs. It is not that we are not talented. Indians are very talented. Most of the doctors in the West are Indians. Many great companies are being led by Indians. For example, Google. We are all over the Silicon Valley, and now most of the CEOs, as I mentioned, of big companies are Indians. So it is not that we are not talented. We are talented, but it is the lack of opportunities that leaves students with no option than to leave the nation and settle abroad. The foundation of this great country was laid by the revolutionary ideas of visionaries like Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Mahatma Gandhi, Sarojini Naidu, Maulana Azad, Amrit Kaur, B.R. Ambedkar, and their ideas were influenced by the ideas of Sardar Bhagat Singh, Ram Prasad Bismil, Ashfaqullah Khan, Swami Vivekanand, whose death anniversary is today, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Abindranath Tagore, and others. The future of this nation depends on us, depends on the youth. The onset of this decade, 2020, witnessed nationwide protests, agitations, some against the government policies and some for the government, led by students of Indian universities. In these times, people often misunderstand and misinterpret the meaning of revolution. We are not asking for any military coup or whatsoever, or we are not advocating any anti-national activity by saying that India needs a revolution. Revolution in the sense of working out a plan of radical changes, which for crucial problems, and which in turn will help us for long-term benefits and changes. Time is changing, India is growing, and so is the population of our nation. The population increase is not happening at a high scale. I was in conversation with a great statistician, and he said that India's population is not rising at a high scale now, at a high rate now. But it is revolution in the society, education system, politics, agriculture, economy, space tech, science tech, infotech, and other areas of growth is required. And because it is a very vast topic, I will not discuss all of those. I'll discuss the need of revolution in education, politics, agriculture, and something about science and technology. Today, we are facing many challenges which we as citizens, along with the government, have to fight with. There are challenges in agriculture. In the past, we saw the farmers protest in Delhi, and there are many more problems in the agrarian sector, including the loan crisis, usage of chemical in agriculture. Cyber security is one of the emerging, challenge that we are going to face. India's former president and my guru, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, used to say that it is time for the nation and its leaders to take up a review mission and suggest methods by which we can accelerate progress so that by 2020, India could achieve the mission of a developed, economically developed nation. That couldn't happen. We see that we are still developing, and we are so far behind to achieve the goal of zero poverty, 100% literacy, quality and affordable healthcare for all, value added employment for every citizen. And it has been more than 70 years since we gained independence. But we are still a developing nation, and countries way younger and way smaller to us have developed themselves. With most of the countries aging, we have the largest youth population, as I already mentioned. The power of youth is one of the most influential, powerful, and useful weapon a nation can have. And undoubtedly, the youth of India is energized. In his book, A Manifesto for Change, which Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam co authored with V. Ponraj, he laid down a few points on how an economically developed India would look like or should look like. And you can go online and get his book, you can read about it. What are those 10 points of economically developed nation? We can do better in the areas of education, agriculture, healthcare, information technology, infrastructure development. Now infrastructure development is a key and a very crucial uh, you know uh, development that should happen in India, because we lack in proper infrastructure. That includes electricity, transport, diminishing rural and urban divide. These avenues are really difficult to achieve even in the next 70 years if the youth doesn't come along with us, and if the government does not give space to the youth, to their ideas. Today, the currency is not performing good if we compare to other countries. The state of healthcare is very poor. We witnessed the Gorakhpur tragedy some years ago, and now we are witnessing a global pandemic. We do not have enough infrastructure. Along with that, our education system is in crisis. Before moving forward, another point is that the youth participation in politics is an important feature. Not the dirty politics of divide and rule or the caste system, or the making of vote banks politics, but the politics of development, and not just power. It is the political system. Why I focus more on politics is because it is the political system that gives support to all the other sectors that I mentioned. It is the political system that supports farmers. It is the political system that supports, you know, information technology. It is the political system that supports students, the youth. It is the political system that supports doctors. And our youth should not run away from politics. Rather, they should enter it to inspire, guide, and lead this nation. When I say to lead this nation, what does leadership mean to me, to this nation? What is the definition of a leader? I am quoting something what Dr. Kalam said, that let me define a leader. He must have a vision and passion and not be afraid of any problem. Instead, he should know how to defeat it. Most importantly, he must work with integrity and succeed with integrity. For Kalam and for me and for anybody, a leader is someone who is never afraid of any difficulty if he has guts and courage. So, for a leader, guts and courage are prerequisite. He also motivated the youth by insisting them to have courage of thinking differently, courage of inventing, to travel the unexplored path, courage to discover the impossible, and to conquer the problems and succeed. These are the qualities our youth should have in them. And he also asked students to question. So the government must invite critiques, must invite students to question rather than make them, you know, something. that they cannot ask questions in future. When I talk about leading the nation, it doesn't mean political leadership alone, but it is a very wide term that includes different parts of the economy. We can be leaders in the education, we can be leaders in agriculture, we can be leaders in different systems. So, of course, I've seen student politics in Delhi University from close quarters, but one must understand that politics is not the dead end for leadership. The term leadership is a multidimensional word, and politics is just a part of it. Though it is a good field to join if you are passionate about it and if your goals are very noble and for the development of the nation. These days, India doesn't need a political leader. India need a creative leader. Who is a creative leader? What are the characteristics of it? Let us discuss that now. A leader should be ready to give the credit to others rather than expect others to give to them. A leader should be equipped to manage change. A leader should have nobility of heart. A leader should have vision and clear thinking and the capacity to be a facilitator of change. And now there are connections between leadership, creative leaderships, and how it can bring about about national development. And it's very interesting if you know hear it very carefully. It's very interesting, the connections between creative leadership and the national development. I'm going to read it out, that a nation's economic development is powered by competitiveness. Competitiveness is powered by knowledge. Knowledge is powered by technology and innovation. Technology and innovation are powered by resource investment. Resource investment is powered by return on investment. Return on investment is powered by revenue. Revenue is powered by volume and repeat sales. Volume and repeat sales are powered by customer loyalty. Customer loyalty is powered by the quality and value of products. Quality and value of products is powered by employee productivity and innovation. Employee productivity is powered by employee loyalty. Employee loyalty is powered by employee satisfaction. Employee satisfaction is powered by the working environment. Working environment is powered by the management innovation, and management innovation is powered by creative leadership. This is very interesting that I found online while reading an article. Now, when we talked about the youth, how energized they are, and how can they be leaders. Now, I think we also should mention what role should the youth play in India in 2030, because the youth are the present and they are the future of this nation. And one of the most critical and the mammoth task, a very big task, is to define the role of youth in today's India. And how can we channelize the power of youth towards nation building? The youth is, before the COVID-19, the youth was on the street, whether they were against the government or were in the support of the government. The thing the thing that should be focused on is that they must not be in any case against the state. Being against the government doesn't mean being against the state, which is India, our constitution. Their presence and agitation on the street are examples of their bravery and valor. We might contest on the authenticities of these protests. There are debates going on. But one thing that has to be accepted without any doubt is that the youth is able to voice their opinions freely, though they are being targeted, but struggling with that, they are still making them heard. The leaders who came from student protests of the JP movement in the 70s under the emergency are now advising students to head back to their classes. So in these times, defining the role becomes critical. Whether they should be on the streets or in the classrooms, that should be decided. And who should decide it? The government or the youth? We have over 600 million youth population, and it is very important to talk about us and what role we are going to play in the process of nation development and strengthening the democracy in India. Youth in any country forms the backbone of the society. It is on the youth's shoulder, it is on our shoulders, the responsibility for change, progress, innovations, and youth is said to have hot blood, and when it gets stirred up, we can fight any force, whether it be corruption, terrorism, or any other problem in the nation or in the world. The greatest resource that I already mentioned in the nation is how the energized youth who are dedicated towards the task of developing the nation can be used. It has now been established that India has the largest youth population and the power should be used wisely. It is high time now to take decisions for the betterment of our youth and encourage them to follow their own path. Who knows, left to their own devices, they may make miracles. And I personally know many innovators like Akash Manoj. He was 13 when I wrote this. Now he must be 14 or 15. He is from Bengaluru, who has developed a technology to detect a silent heart attack. There are many more such talented young people in our cities and villages. We have the resources required, but that's not enough. Let's use a very basic principle of economics to illustrate this point. In the production possibility curve, when the resources are underutilized, the economy is unable to perform at its peak. The same goes with the nation. And if we compare a country as the economy and the youth as the resource, if the youth is underutilized, India cannot achieve its peak development. Now, coming to a very important point which I got to know from a former cabinet minister, Yashwant Sinha ji, while I was interviewing him for a book that I am currently working on. He said that when it comes to nation building, then it's a question of combining self interest with national interest, which means that I want employment for myself, okay, so that I can raise a family, but simultaneously, that employment must enable me to make a contribution to the nation's wealth, a nation's development. So every employment opportunity should be measured, should be judged whether it is making a contribution to the nation or not. In most cases, it does, and in some cases, it may not. So combining personal interest with national interest or societal interest is an important thing for a youngster. But youngsters have a very major role other than this. That is, when something wrong is going on in the nation, like the emergency during the Indira Gandhi's years, or even before that, the youth came out, and that led to what they call the JP movement in 70s. Similarly, today the youth feel that something wrong is happening in the country, so that they have to come forward and they are agitating against policies of the government. So an additional feature in today's movement is that large number of women are coming forward in the streets. During the freedom movement of the JP movement and today, it is the youth of the country that has taken the lead. So it is not that youth constitute a very selfish group of people who are interested in nothing more than their own personal future. Some of them are, but not all of them. So youth have a capacity to rise when they feel that something is wrong in the nation. Now coming to the sector wise approach. First sector that I'm going to talk about is, I already took for 24 minutes and half of my time is already gone. So let me come to this point of politics in India and youth contribution to it. India is an emerging market, and very important emerging market, because of the power of youth. One of the most appealing fields for the young mind is politics. Unfortunately, today it has become the profession of the useless and for those who are good for nothing. In India, Political representation of youth. Just a moment. In India, political representation of youth in parliament, state assemblies, and panchayat is very low, which is a matter of concern as only a young representative can represent the aspirations of the youth of his or her constituency. We have only around, that should be marked, that we have only around 12% of the parliamentarians under the age of 40 in a country which is home to 65% of the population under the age of 35. Even if we see the cabinet ministers of our nation, a very less number of ministers are less than 40. In my opinion, we are not representing the youth as much as we should. This is one of the most debated topics of our times, that whether the students should be on the street protesting or should they go back to their classes and remain apolitical. I'm studying in Delhi University and I've seen student politics from close quarters, though I never directly participated in active politics or joined any political organization. While working on a book, I thought I should present a neutral take on students' politics without favoring any political ideology. There are merits of political, the student politics, and there are demerits. With majority of population under 25, most of our elected representatives are above 60. That is very unfair with the youth population, because to represent the aspirations, I already said, we need young representatives. I asked a political activist from ABVP, Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, that why students should take part in politics. His take on the question was, if we look at the world or India, we can easily find policies relating to youth education and sports, but those policies are made in the parliament, and it doesn't count students role in that. They do not ask students before framing a policy. So in his opinion, it is better to choose the future of politics before the politics chooses our future. Students must take part in politics and also focus on developmental politics by working in the positive direction. We can take example of the JP movement that I already mentioned, that made many political stalwarts of today. You know, many great politicians of our times right now participated in the students movement in the 70s. I was interviewing the former Finance and External Affairs Minister of India, Sri Yashwant Sinha ji. He told me that JP Jayaprakash Narayan, popularly known as JP, said to him that young people should not enter politics or public life until they are financially stable. You should get into activism, but in active politics, it is a total different sphere. We have enough politicians. The need of the hour is to make political leaders. The basic difference between two is that politician promises and a leader fulfills the promise, though it is not the same every time. Now, talking about a young leader, because I think we should also give some examples from which the youth can take inspiration from. So there is one of the youngest national spokesperson of the Congress party these days, Jaiveer Shergill, and he's also successful advocate at the Supreme Court of India. He is also someone who advocates more participation of youth in politics. I asked him a question on what is his vision of India by 2030. He replied that we have to take 4 steps, and these are very important steps, I must say. First is, the youth in politics is the most romanticized idea of our times. But is it a reality? Is it the representation of youth is the representation of youth in parliament enough? These questions need to be answered with facts and figures. I already stated the facts. India is a classical example of a young country, but an aging parliament. The electoral political representation in the Vidhan Sabhas and the parliament is disproportionate to the young India, which is under the age of 30 to 35. That accounts for our 65% population. So, his vision as a young politician is that India achieves the same percentage of representation in the Vidhan Sabhas in the parliaments as it was when we gained independence. So there were 164 members below 40 when we got independence. The first target is to encourage the youth to enter electoral politics, encourage a culture within the national parties where the youth can be given representation. Number two is another big change that he wished to see is the civil society and the political administrative class that have to start work in tandem for effective implementation of policies. Slogans of Swachh Bharat, Startup India will be hollow if the civil society does not support and promote the implementation of these slogans. Number three change is that he wished to see is harsh, absolute ban on religion in politics. The Election Commission should set harsh examples, even as harsh as the Honorable Court punishes a murder convict. Same kind of punishment in terms of the parable should be given to a politician who tries to provoke the divide, to provoke, who, who try to provoke the society to divide among religion, who tries to inject an atmosphere where people vote in the name of religion. Last is that he wants that voters to vote on pure issues of development agenda, facts and figures, and not propaganda and emotions. He said that the youth must talk about development, that is the developmental politics I already mentioned. But why the youth should participate in active politics? There is a famous saying that nothing about us without us. And he continues to say that in young India, youth participation is essential so that your aspirations, desires, your vision for India are reflected in the policies of our nation. Being in politics should not be reduced to being netas. Politics means social activism, active criticism, active suggestion, and positive feedbacks. I repeat, politics means social activism, active criticism, active suggestion, and positive feedbacks. Students who are interested in different fields are still eligible to be active in politics by effectively sending their suggestions for lawmaking, legislature making, for criticism to be heard, and for youth, effective participation in politics in any form or any manner, an environment of freedom to criticize, question, and contribute should be provided, and political class has to ensure that the message has been delivered to the young minds, that their suggestions are valuable, accepted, implemented, and reflected in the policy making of the government. So the youth should be made feel feel that they are a part of the society, they are a part of the administration, that their ideas are being heard, their ideas are being thought upon. This is something very interesting that JV told me. Now coming, we are done with the politics part. Now we'll move to a very interesting bit, that is the innovation, creativity, and the education system. We all are a part of education system. Every youngster is a part of the education system, whether he's in a college, she's in college or school or a university doing MA, PhD. One day I got a message on my family WhatsApp group that stated that now almost every big multinational company in America have an Indian CEO, from Google to Microsoft, and now the White House have to prepare samosas when they invite the CEOs for dinner. It is amazing to see Indians doing great in abroad, outside the nation. And it is almost time to do great things in India. Most of the CEOs were educated in India. They all went through the same Indian education system that we are going through right now. One of the visions of India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru ji, was to create institutions like IITs, Indian Institute of Technology, and IIMs, Indian Institute of Management. They are world class facilities in India. But many things require regular resetting for better functioning. And one such thing is our education system that requires regular intervention from the lawmakers to reintroduce some new and some new policies, or to renew the policies of the past to meet the expectations of the future. Our education system, if you say, has become a factory of manufacturing engineers and doctors. Most of the doctors in the US are now Indians. Indian parents force their children to become either doctor or an engineer for their family prestige and a better retirement life. Though in the recent past we have seen graduates struggling to get employed, a major chunk of qualified engineers are unemployed right now. Our education system has become more exam and mark oriented, that has led to the increased anxieties among young people. Students cram to secure good marks in exams, and they do not understand the concepts. They just rote learn everything, they just mug up everything to get good marks, and the good marks have become the brand of being an intelligent kid. you know my grandfather, let me give you an example. My grandfather Babulal Sharma worked as a technical officer in IIT Kanpur in the 70s 80s, when IIT was pretty new to this nation. He taught machinery to young engineers. He was a self-taught man who earlier worked as a night shift worker at Tiger's Lock Factory in Aligarh, and then in Siri Pilani, where he got the chance to demonstrate working of a machine to the then Education Minister MC Chhagla of Indira Gandhi's cabinet. One of his one of the students who used to visit his workshops in IIT Kanpur went to become one of the greatest innovators, Arvind Gupta ji, Padma Shri, and I was interviewing him for a book that I already mentioned, that what is his vision as an innovator, as an educator for India in 2030. He said that all children of India, irrespective of caste, gender, religion, should go to school and get a good, meaningful education. Basic health services should be made available to all. We also have to develop and make progress, but also take care of the environment. Climate change is a topic that is very less focused in India. We do not talk about it, but it is happening, and we might see the results in coming future very soon. We all should develop and take care of the environment. We must respect all minorities in the nation. The Constitution of India provides all citizens equal rights, and by 2030 we should have employment under employment schemes, and we should plant more trees and more move away from nuclear to wind and solar plants. So it is, what a fantastic aim it is for the nation. We all can do it with integrity, and we can succeed with integrity for in this by the end of 2030. On the question of how can we develop nation with more innovation and creativity, he said that we need to change the entrance exam patterns of competitive exams like joint entrance exams for IITs and the NEET exam for medical. We should consider marks and projects done by students from class 6th to 12th, and we must give good weightage to class 12th board exams in the entrance. This will in turn reduce cramming and will marginalize the booming coaching centers. That is what is being done in most of the developed nations. This will also lead to less anxiety among students. We recently saw some debates followed by the unfortunate demise, for the suicide of a great actor Sushant Singh Rajput, that has led to a discussion on the increasing anxieties among young minds. So this change in the education system, the examination pattern, might actually reduce the level of anxiety. This will help students think out of the box. And for today, parents pressurize their children so much for achieving good marks, which adds on to the stress they already carry, the students. So according to Padma Shri Arvind Gupta, we should start open book exams that will test students' conceptual ability than his ability to mug. I think our education system is lacking and it does need a revolution. So I asked a question to Arvind ji that, you know, what revolution is needed in this education system? He replied, the rich and the middle classes have sabotaged the system to suit their interest. Please underline this. The government school systems where the poorest go these days are crumbling. They're falling apart. The rich have set private international baccalaureate, IB and elite schools for their children, and after school they send their children abroad. They have less or no interest in bettering government or municipal schools. One of the best solutions to this problem, because when I am discussing the problem, we should also talk about the solutions. So one of the solution to this problem was provided by Justice Agarwal of Allahabad High Court. He said that in the last 70 years we have ruined our public education and healthcare system. This is because the government officials have no stake in it. His radical idea and his radical solution for this problem was to make it compulsory for every government employee to send their children to government schools and visit government PHCs and hospitals when they are ill. Once the government officer use these facilities, they will strive hard, and within a few years government schools and hospitals will improve and shine. But it is quite difficult to implement radical solutions in time like these. Now, one question arises again, and I should ask this question to everybody, that how do you think the youth can contribute in nation building? His Dr. Arvind Gupta's I- idea of how youth can contribute is that historically, if we see, students with idealism have been at the helm of social movements and have driven change for equality and quality. It is the youth, the students who have headed the movement against the governments, against the policies. They must question every move of any government because any draconian measure of today may hit them very hard in the long run. Now coming to the agriculture part where I, you know, interviewed Padma Vibhushan, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, who is known as the father of the Green Revolution. We see the hunger and malnutrition index in India is quite high. The Green Revolution in India started in the 1970s under the leadership of people like Lal Bahadur Shastri, that transformed India from one who imported food grains to an exporting nation. The credit of the Green Revolution should go to two people. One is C. Subramaniam, the then agriculture minister, and uh, the father of Green Revolution in India, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. Dr. Swaminathan played a significant role in the agriculture renaissance in India. So, according to Dr. Swaminathan, the term Green Revolution was coined in 1968 to mark the beginning of agricultural progress based on improved yields, productivity improvement. Now, the state of agriculture is not up to the mark in India. Almost 70% of our population depends on agriculture. We are a Krishi Pradhan Desh, as we call it. So I asked him the causes of crisis in the agricultural system in India. He said there is agricultural crisis caused by climate change, assured and remunerative marketing problem, and above all an uneconomic nature of farming. In India, every political party promises to waive off farmer loans and free the farmer from debt situation. But according to Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, waiving off loans is not a solution. It is it may be necessary to do it occasionally when it is there is flood or drought. Uh, particularly when there is monsoon aberration, but it should not become a regular habit. I think this is right because in India, agriculture is highly dependent on monsoons. The agriculture in India is very medieval, and if the failed crops, if the crop fails due to lack of rain or insufficient market funds and demands, farmers get trapped in debt, and it led to farmer suicides. Thus, to overcome this, government waives farm loans. I was reading in an article that demand for loan waivers arises because income of farmers is not increasing at a reasonable rate. Government or any political party has to focus on improving farmers' income rather than use it in political manifesto. Dr. Swaminathan, in an interview to the Business Standard, and you can get it online, mentioned that basic difficulties of farmers could be overcome only if integrated attention was given to pricing, procurement, and public distribution. If you want to know the major challenges, I would request every one of you, every Indian, to go and read the National Commission of Farmer and the National Policy of Farmer report, which came out in 2007, headed by Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, which well documented and all the challenges that the agriculture is facing, and they gave all the solutions, almost 201 of them, on how we can overcome this situation. I asked Dr. Swaminathan that what can be the possible solutions to these problems and how can the youth contribute in providing solutions. He replied, the empowerment of youth is essential to modernize agriculture. We need a technological transformation of farm operations, something like what happened in 1970s during the Green Revolution. Okay, so even the former president of India, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, said that India require a second green revolution, which take rice and wheat cultivators beyond the grain production stage to agro-food processing, and give value addition to it, emphasizing on the need of green revolution based on knowledge of new agricultural technique to meet future food requirements of the nation. Former President Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam said that it is only possible if we can get, the youth to think about going and joining agriculture. We should work more towards making agriculture cool, as they say, the cool for the younger generations. Economic and Political Weekly, there's a good article in the Economic and Political Weekly, EPW, that reported the phenomena of youth abandoning agriculture as a profession is not that one is not one that is unique to India. For example, the most in most of the African nations, rural youth leave agriculture at alarming rates due to inaccessibility to right information and knowledge, necessary inputs, and credit for farming. So the solution to this is youth can involve in agriculture. It can evolve innovative way of farming, keeping in view climate change and other seasonal abnormalities. It is the need of the hour to make agriculture occupation remunerative to sustain the interest of youth toward agriculture. Now, quickly moving to a very important topic, the second last topic for today's session, healthcare. Healthcare in India is one of the most crucial challenge that we are currently facing. According to the latest data pre-COVID by IPEF, it is that healthcare market in India is expected to reach 372 billion US dollars by the end of 2022, driven by rising incomes, greater health awareness, lifestyle diseases, and increasing access to insurance. And the number of doctors increased from 841,000 in 2017 to 827,000 in 2010. The world's largest and the most ambitious project in healthcare, funded by the government, Ayushman Bharat, was launched in 2018. So When asked about the challenges that we are facing in the field of healthcare, one of the finest public policy experts, Professor Rajendra Pratap Gupta, said that the biggest challenge is low investment from the side of the government, poor and late diagnosis, and above that, questionable quality of clinicians. We have to incentivize um, preventive care beyond what we are currently doing. Professor Gupta has worked with global organization and he was nominated as in the Global Agenda Council of the World Economic Forum. So he said that we lack doctors, nurses, healthcare, uh, you know, workers. With increasing population, any challenge in the healthcare sector looks dangerous because we all resort to the healthcare sector when we get ill. So over 60 innocent kids lost their lives in the Gorakhpur tragedy of 2017, if you all remember, in a government run medical college in Gorakhpur. And recently we are seeing how the healthcare system is trying to cope up with the increasing COVID cases, especially in Delhi, which was known for its good healthcare system before COVID. There is an article by Arvind Kasturi on NCBI website that mentioned the 5 A's challenges to healthcare of India, and it is very important to understand. So, according to the article, I quote: first is the awareness or lack of it. How aware is the Indian population about important issues regarding their health? Second is access or lack of it. What is the level of access of population to healthcare of good quality? Third is absence or the manpower crisis in the healthcare. Do we have adequate number of personnels? Are they appropriately trained? Are they equitably deployed? Fourth is affordability or the cost of healthcare. Is it affordable? Is our healthcare affordable? Fifth is accountability or lack of it. Is our healthcare can be held accountable? So on the question of possible solutions and what role can youth play, I asked Professor Gupta, and he replied that when we have to start mapping with our facilities of to our population and incidence of illnesses, then accordingly we have to invest in capacity building. Healthcare is a clinical skill dependent sector. We need to focus on developing skill and move from an overly doctor centric healthcare system, and we must use information technology to make the healthcare system more transparent, accountable, and outcome driven. We need to invest in R&D, research and development, and clinical validations of Ayurveda, our ancient science of medicine. We have to incentivize preventive care by giving benefits to people in employment and promotions based on health and fitness, and even subsidize insurance premium for fit and healthy people and those who do not smoke and drink. In India, youth constitute a major chunk, and if they are healthy, then India can afford healthcare for all. There is a question that can India afford free healthcare for all as it is in the US? No, we cannot. India is a very big country and it is very difficult to afford free healthcare for every citizen of this nation. If youth behave irresponsibility on health, India in the current state cannot afford healthcare for all and it will remain a pipe dream. Moreover, we need to change the parameters of how we evaluate healthcare indices. It is the fact that providing free healthcare for all is impossible for a big nation, and but we can work towards making it more affordable for the people so that more and more people can get quality healthcare. If you see the you know if you ever get a chance, I think you should never get a chance to visit a hospital, but if you get a chance to visit a hospital run by government any day in the future, it will be a nightmare. The situation of government hospitals are falling apart. It and we are moving towards the privatization of healthcare these days. Private hospitals are coming up. They are charging lakhs of rupees for treatment, and the poor and the helpless remain with the government's hand. We have to change this. We have to incentivize it. We have to work on the capacity building in healthcare to make it accessible, affordable for the people of India. Coming to the last part of the lecture, it is on the science and technology. It was independent India's first Prime Minister, Dr. Jawaharlal Nehru, sorry, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who initiated reforms to promote higher education in science and technology in India. As a result, the first IIT was inaugurated on 18th August 1951 at Kharagpur by the then Education Minister of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. This was followed by many more IITs in India. Then the USSR helped India in setting up Indian Space Research Organization (ISRO) to develop the space program in the 60s, and India conducted nuclear test on 18th May 1947 at Pokhran. India has produced scientists like Sir Jagdish Chandra Bose, Professor Yash Pal, one of my inspirations, Nobel laureates Sir C.V. Raman, Hargobind Khurana, and many others who made us feel proud, and some are still working hard for the next breakthrough, especially in the vaccine of COVID for the COVID vaccine. In the annual budget of 2020 to 21, the finance minister announced an investment of 8,000 crore for the next 5 years for the new national mission on quantum technology in the field of computing, communication, and cybersecurity with widespread applications. So, we do spend a good amount of our budget, almost 10% of it, on science and technology. India is going towards an era of quantum enabled science and technology and quantum computing. In the coming few years, we will see new researches in the field of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, 3D printing, drones, DNA data storage, and these are going to change the course of history and economic order. In return, these technologies are going to benefit the nation by enabling innovations in the field of aerospace, agriculture, health, education, cybersecurity that will further improve the present status of employment opportunities and human resource development. I recently had a conversation on email with Professor C.N.R. Rao Bharat Ratna, who was conferred the highest civilian honor, Bharat Ratna, in 2014. So I asked him that what is his take on the way the Indian scientific scenario is progressing in 2020. As the scientific advisor to the government, he always voiced his concern on the research environment in India. He replied that we have no choice but to increase the funding for science and technology and education sector to 2% and 6% of the GDP respectively. According to the latest comparison of science productivity of different countries, China and USA are the top two, and we must do better than them. On the question of how can the youth contribute to the nation building through science and technology, Professor Rao wrote to me that interest in science should develop at a very young age. We must employ various means of exciting the young minds of the youth. It takes one spark, one lecture, one meeting of person for this to happen. In my case, it was Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. In your case, it could be anyone. This is the case of my life and that of many other youth. The need of a role model to change your life. So I asked him for his advice to young scientists and enthusiasts who want to research and establish a career in science and technology. This is very important when we talk about India in 2030. Youth people should be free to make up their minds on what they want to do at an early stage, when they are in 14 and 15 years old. Then they should pursue their aim with goodness and with determination, with dedication and hard work. And those who have done it have already succeeded and always succeed. So these were some sectors that I talked about in this lecture, and it is a whole big field that everyone must research, everyone must suggest their ideas on how we can make India an economically developed nation by 2030. See, the idea of India 2020 was very ambitious. We cannot, many people say that the goals of India 2020 were unrealistic and they couldn't be achieved by 2020. But I say that at least someone like a visionary, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, at least tried to give us all a roadmap or an aspiration for the nation that yes, we can be an economically developed nation. If not by 2020, then by the next decade, 2030. India in 2030 should be look like something of what Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam should, have seen in his lifetime but couldn't, an economically developed nation in all fields. In politics, with great leadership, in science and technology, we being the scientific leaders of the world, with great researches, breakthroughs, and Nobel Prizes, in education system where every youth is being educated holistically, not just for marks but for a personality development, and then in agriculture where youth is very much engaged in agriculture, they are inspired and they're motivated, they are trying to get new innovations in agriculture, and then in every other field, economy is another part that I missed in today's session. But if we will work on all other sectors, it will eventually help in boosting the economy. The primary, the secondary, and the tertiary sectors all will improve if the youth come forward, work with integrity, succeed with integrity. The part that the society will play, the part the government will play, the part the other sectors, the stakeholders will play, along with the part of the youth, it is important that it works, with it work together like a chain reaction. Then hopefully India will be an economically developed nation by India 2030. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rahul Suri, for organizing this. And thank you, everyone who watched me live, who tolerated me for 1 hour. I'm always happy to get your suggestions, your ideas on India 2030. You can mail me at ishansha@gmail.com, ESHANSHA@gmail.com. You can connect with me on Facebook and Instagram. And I think I should end here. Thank you very much once again. All the best. Jai Hind.